Hello, I'm Earl Gibbs, and welcome to Earl Gibbs Live. I have a very interesting guest. Been on the program many times before. When I come back, you'll find out more about my guest. Let me tell you about the sponsors. Windward Islands Bank in Phillipsburg, in Cul-de-Sac, and in Simpson Bay. For all your banking needs, it's the Windward Islands Bank and GEBE, our local water and electricity company. GEBE service been run for over 6 decades. GEBE. I'm Earl Gibbs here with you, and my guest is Dr. Arduin. Arduin is an attorney, and she was the first ombudsman for St. Martin, 10-10-10, right?
Yes.
And also, you're retired now, but still working, right?
Well, not still working, still contributing.
I was hesitant to say retire because I think lawyers and doctors don't necessarily retire, right?
Well, retire, it all depends how you look at it. Retire is withdrawing from an active service.
And you're not doing that. Definitely.
Well, let me say good evening to you, Mr. Gibbs, and your audience. However, whether I retired, yes. When people ask me, "Are you really retired?" I said, "Yes, I am retired." But can't I come and consult you as a lawyer anymore? I said, retire means retire. However, of course, God blessed me with health and energy. So, of course, here and there, I give training, I give a little talk here and there. I write articles now, after 3 years being very quiet in the background. And because I believe in reflecting. So I use time to reflect on 45 years of work. I started as a teacher, then I became a lawyer, and as you said, my last functions was ombudsman. So I had a lot to reflect on and as a matter of fact, compile my thoughts to see, hey, how did I reach here and where are we as a people?
Well, it's quite interesting because, you being the first ombudsman for St. Martin, you served 2 terms, right?
I got 2 terms, but under the condition that I said, hey, the only reason why I accepted the second term, it was because of the Hurricane Irma.
Oh, okay.
Because I had to demit office just in October 2017, and I said, Captain doesn't jump ship, in time of a storm.
Yeah.
So I accepted the second term with the condition that I will leave office as soon as things are a little, more stable, quiet. And so I did, and made room for a next generation.
That's good. And I introduced you, you're Dr. Arduin, your attorney. Are people surprised? What do you mean a doctor and an attorney? When they explain it?
Very, very surprised. It is interesting that you asked that. I have acquired my PhD in 1993 in the Netherlands, and up to today, for more than 30 years, in this community, people still want to refer to me as doctorandus, and do not understand the difference between a doctorandus and a doctor of law. And I'm happy to explain
Definitely,
that because, I've always said it is not about the title. However, by not correcting it, youngsters do not understand that being a PhD, a doctor of law, is also for the average St. Martiner. The difference between doctorandus and doctor is a minimum of 5 years. As doctorandus, you are like a master's. You have a master's in law, and as doctor, you become a scientist. Because what is the difference between a study as doctorandus? Yes, you studied, you went to university, but to become a doctor of law, a PhD, you have to develop a new theory and prove to the scientific world internationally that your theory stands. And in my case, I did my PhD on international timeshare. And that was where I compared 10 legal systems internationally, like Greece, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, the Netherlands Antilles, the US, and name it, the UK, where I compared their legal basis for timeshare to see where it's going, because timeshare is a phenomenon that started in 1986, and I started to do my research in the second half of the 80s, because nobody could tell me what the legal ramifications of timeshare is. Everybody was busy with the sales programs, the marketing, but not the legal aspect. So internationally, I was the second person at that time in 1993 that came out with a theory, a legal study on time sharing. And as such, in fact, that's why I became an international lawyer. I had quite some clientele in the timeshare world on an international basis. And so it is important for our youngsters to know that going to university and getting a bachelor's or a master's or a doctorandus is not the end. And I believe that one continuously, up to today, make that fail to make the distinction in our society, because they indeed, as you said, cannot fathom, cannot envision that somebody living among them, like, is a scientist internationally based on law.
Yeah.
My theories is being used all over.
Yeah. And that's good, because we don't think good about ourselves sometimes. And we just celebrated Emancipation Day. And you had a trilogy, a three-part on emancipation. And it was quite interesting, because as I told you before we started, my mind was racing, looking back and thinking about things that I experienced, etc. But why did you decide to write it this year? And what was the objective?
Interesting. Thank you for that question. You know something, as I said, yes, I'm retired this is my 4th year. The first 3 years I stayed very quiet because I evaluated, I reflected, looking at, okay, Nilda, you have achieved a lot, you have been accomplished, and I started to look back at what did I do or did not do different than other people that are also accomplished. But I must say, I don't have to apologize. I don't have to be bashful about it. I don't have to pretend. No, I have a very satisfactory track record, not only locally, but internationally. And so I reflected. And you have not seen me, neither heard me for many years, because I was in that trajectory. I didn't want to be disturbed. I didn't want to deviate my attention. So beginning 2020, after COVID and everything, I made a call to action. I wrote an article in January, a call to action, because while I was retired, sometimes, I do trainings for Parliament or other institutions. And in 2019, I did one for Parliament. And my point is, at this stage of end time, if I cannot say what need to be said, then what was my whole career for? So in 2019, when I gave Parliament a training, I told them a disclaimer from the beginning. Anything I say is not meant political. but it's the truth. And you can challenge what I say. Don't feel that I'm bashing a certain politician or a certain party. In 2020, they asked me again. No, I lie. 2020 was the first time that I gave them a training. 2021, they invited me again for training. I said, the fact that you invited me again means that you understood my disclaimer. And based on that, in my practice as a lawyer, I saw a lot what's happening in the community. As ombudsman, I was like, the bird above everything and looking in. So I have evaluated government functioning, our functioning as a community, from outside looking in. And then coming to your question, what prompted me to write the trilogy? I thought, hey, after reflecting, there are certain things I realize that we don't realize some trauma that are in our minds, that there are a lot of people of color, for example, do not realize how they discriminate against each other. As people of color, we have a color code. When you're very light skinned, you have certain advantages. And when you are very dark, you have disadvantages. And among us and people among ourselves, we don't even realize that. How are we going to tackle it then when a Caucasian, the white man, discriminate us because we are doing worse? And I'm saying to people that discuss with me, I was blessed by the Creator with a very dark skin. And I think because I have this very dark skin, I have learned how people of color think and few people of darker skin than them. I have seen the situation, Caucasian versus black. And then I said, listen, I cannot keep silent. I want to bring awareness. That is the basis of my trilogy. The first article was about alerting people. Slavery was not that long ago.
Yeah.
The example that I use to illustrate that, my sister's grandchildren, they sat on my mother's lap. And my mother was their great-grandmother. If I had the privilege to know my great-grandparents, I would not have been able to sit on their lap because they were born in slavery before 1863. So while we pretend that slavery is in the past, even people of color today are saying, but what you want to talk about slavery, it's in the past. No. My second article is a timeline where I am showing that it was only in 1948 that the descendants of the slaves, the Afro-Caribbean in the Dutch kingdom, got voting rights.
Only 74 years ago, huh?
You understand?
Wow.
Not even 50 years ago. How can it be the past? And we are alive. It happened in our lifetime. And the third article was about the angry blacks. Because oftentimes you hear Caucasians, when you are challenging them, say, oh yes, you're just angry. These are angry blacks. And there are people of color that are repeating it. Yes, talking about slavery, it's because angry. And in my last article about angry blacks, I outlined some of the science behind transgenerational trauma.
You know, it's quite interesting because you mentioned the slave trade and also Holland and the colonies, Indonesia, Suriname, Curacao, and the dependencies. All of that had an impact on us as a people. The problem is that I think that we need to be able to not forget it, and we need to also say, like the Jews, never again. And the reason why I say never again, like the Jews, you just have to see what's happening right now in Ukraine. Who would ever think we will witness Russia literally bombing that country away after what happened in 1945? Who would think what happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina just a few years ago and in Rwanda? So I think black people of any more than any other race got to be very careful because it could happen again.
Absolutely, and absolutely, it could happen again, and definitely, as you mentioned, the Jews. I also reminded my readers about the Jews. The Jews are celebrating more than 3,000 years now, every year Passover. Why they do that? To be reminded of the liberation from slavery of Egypt, and to let every generation know never again. And I believe that our people have to understand all that you said, a while ago, but also you cannot understand certain institutions, certain acts of discrimination, whether it's open or covered, right, in our societies and our world today. It is not something that just happened. So knowing what our journey was, how we reached here, then you can deal with it.
I think the reason why I said what I said earlier, and I think I have to clarify it a little bit, is that after World War II, we had the United Nations, and everyone thinks that this will create some peace in the world. This will protect. They haven't been able to protect anyone, basically. So we as black people got to be careful with this false sense of security in this world today and the whole new world order. And at the same time, we don't want to remember slavery. We don't want to be reminded of it. I remember in 1984, I did a survey for Mr. Lake in his newspaper, Newsday. I surveyed local black people, and 85 to 92% of them said they didn't like the paper because every week the paper had something about Africa, some story about South Africa. At that time we had apartheid in South Africa. They didn't want to hear nothing about that. But when Mandela was released, we all was cheering. But he had news, their local paper, trying to remind us of all the problems we as black people were going through, even in Africa, and we didn't want to know about it.
Right. And the point is, oftentimes, I'm not saying this derogatively, but people like to stay in the dark, right? Rather than dealing with the pain of it. Yeah? Or sometimes it's just ignorance as well, right? However, that's why scientists now, psychologists, psychiatrists, has realized, because one of the things among people of color, it's always, but how the Jews get over it, or move on, not get over it, move on. You mentioned in our conversation before the Japanese, how they move on, and how come that the Africans, the diaspora Africans and the continental Africans, why can't we move on? The point is, if you don't study how it happened, what happened, you will stay forever ignorant about it and do not tackle it. For example, in my first article, I used the Willie Lynch letter, and I put it between parentheses. Yeah? Why between parentheses? Of course, some people will say, hey, but the Willie Lynch letter is a hoax. No, there are different forms of telling a story. What is the story behind how St. Martin is divided with 21 square miles French and 60 square miles Dutch, right? Is the story about the soldiers that ran and were drunk or whatever, is it a hoax? It is a way to tell a story. The story is that this island was occupied by two countries, France and Dutch, and they had to divide it. Question is, how come that France got 21 square miles and Holland 16 square miles? The legend, how it is told and even repeated in officially, nobody questioned that story. That is not the story. However, there are debates, hey, but the Willie Lynch letter is a hoax. No, it is a way of telling a story of how the atrocities of slavery. So don't tell me, yes, but the Willie Lynch letter was a hoax, 1712. No, it is a way of telling a story. So the debate is not whether he was really a slave owner that did a speech. No, no, no. It is the content, how slavery used to be. And if we do not understand those things, we will be blinded, because those that think it's convenient will say, hey, that's a hoax, don't even go there. But if you are aware, then you look at how was slavery conducted and what are the ideas and institutions that we have today that are remnants of that slave trade.
Yeah, your three articles was quite thought provocative, because when you look at it, at some point in our lives as Black people, we tend to look at the white person causing all of our problems. So whatever we have as a problem, we can always say, well, it's because of the white guy. Not necessarily true, because if we understand ourselves, and the white guy is not telling you you got to have 5 women and then you fail because you can't support your other family, but we blame it all on slavery. Maybe that's true, maybe not, I don't know, but I don't want to live my life as a Black man blaming when I can do something for it. And I think in your article, you try to address not that what I gave as an example, but the general problem we have as Black people.
Yes, they are thought-provoking for both Black and white people. I want to bring awareness. I want to start a conversation. I mean, you're saying, you said, for example, that yes, a lot of people, they are shunning away. This is one of the reasons, as I indicated, I used 3 years to reflect. How come that I'm not blaming the white person just like that? Yes, there is a measure of blame. Yeah. However, I'm looking at myself, and there is where I realize what is the difference between me, for example. I'm aware since I'm 5 years, yes, and I will give that story, of my self-worth, yeah, and that I'm responsible not to make that situation of slavery ever happen to me, yes, to be dominated by a white person. I will give that story. So, yes, the articles are thought-provoking because I want us to look at ourselves. How not being aware of our self-worth, yeah, oftentimes make that we have a lack of courage. a lack of self-esteem, thinking that we can do it. Yeah, it has been traditionally that the white man comes and tell us the history is written by the imperial masters. Yes, it is time that history being written and interpreted by us ourselves. Coming to my 5 years, when I was 5 years, I went to evening with my parents. Oh, evening at church. My parents hailed back from Suriname. And that evening there was a documentary about slavery. And so my parents always involved us from a very young age to be very aware. They corrected our history books. Yeah, where in the history book is written the Antillean history book Nus Patria about the revolution in Curacao, where the history book literally had written those disobedient, dumb slaves run up the Christoffel mountain, and the bright, brilliant Dutch soldiers surrounded the hill waiting for them to come down and arrest them, right? And the story. My parents, when they saw stories like that in my history book, they'll sit us down. Listen, no. These slaves were heroes, yeah? And they correct the story. 5 years, I'm in this meeting, a documentary film, and they were gonna saying how slaves were being punished. And then they said when a woman, an enslaved woman, was pregnant, they will dig a hole. She had to go and lie with her belly in it, and then she would get whipped. And at the moment that is what's going to happen, my mother turned my face for me not to see it, but I saw it already. At 5 years, I said, that would never happen with me. I would never allow a white person to enslave me. Yeah? Because I would not be the pawn of nobody. So I have many years being aware, and a lot of us did not have that awakening yet. And that's why my articles, yes, are quite confronting at times for both colored and Caucasian people. But the conversation have to be held. If not, we will keep blaming each other. But the thing is, we have to start understanding.
But we can see today, even in our politics, our relationship with the Dutch government and the Caribbean part of the kingdom, there's this mutual mistrust and at times abuse at the same time. And at the same time, we never make up our minds of what we really want. And then when someone does it for us, we get upset and we get angry. And I sense in your writing to that, you're making some slight little, not too clear, but I think you're a little more cautious in the political aspect of it, but there are also some political problems we have.
Oh, Jay, you hit the nail on the head. The point is, if we do not understand ourselves, if we do not understand our shortcomings, quote unquote, our weaknesses, we would never be able to deal with it. As I gave the timeline of since 1863, abolition of slavery in the Dutch territory, in the Dutch kingdom. If you read that article and ponder on the years that I indicated, you will come to the place where you more or less start understanding what you're seeing there. If we don't do for ourselves, somebody else is gonna do it. If we don't have the courage to take up responsibility and be accountable, we always put ourselves in a second class position. Yes?
Exactly.
And so if you allow me to give
Go ahead.
just briefly some key points. 1863, abolition of slavery in the Dutch territories. At that point in time, people from African descent, the enslaved Africans, were not citizens, they were assets.
Right.
Yeah? They were not considered people. They were just assets of the state. Yes? And what one forgets that colonies, yes, a lot of people say, yes, we are a colony of Holland, but we forget that when we look at those laws, those old laws, the laws were written for the colonists. Yeah, what is a colonist? People coming from the motherland, living in overseas territory. And so that term, motherland in itself, which confused me utterly when I was a child in school. No, Holland is not my motherland. Holland is the motherland of the colonists, yeah? Those people that left Holland and come and live here. So talking about Holland, our motherland, we didn't understand it. We don't, up to today, people referring to Holland as our motherland. No, it's the motherland of the colonists. Holland is for the enslaved African, the imperial home country. Yeah? They were the empires, the imperial home country. So we have to understand, hey, we were not people, we were just assets. It's only in 1922 the territories in the West became part of the territory of the Dutch kingdom. And then we have to remember, we're talking lately so much about autonomy and the status after the charter. However, if the charter was enacted in 1954, oral, and the descendants of the enslaved African got voting rights in 1948, tell me who were around the table to negotiate that charter. Not people looking like you and me.
Definitely.
You understand? And if we do not understand and analyze these things, we make wrong presumptions, right? So that charter, in the first place, apart from what I'm saying here, that charter was never written for a situation like this. What was the charter written for? To keep Indonesia, which was the milk cow of the Netherlands, yeah, to keep them in the fold, because the Netherlands saw that decolonization movement had started. Indonesia had shown, listen, we are occupied by the Japanese now, yeah. However, as soon as that's finished, we're going independent. Holland tried to fight tooth and nail, not to let the milk cow slip them, right? And so the queen, respectfully referring to Queen Wilhelmina, she was in exile in England, said, after the war is over, we're gonna make a new agreement in the kingdom to keep Indonesia in the fold. So that is the basis of the charter. However, in 1947, Indonesia said, partner, you keep your charter, I'm out. So who's left? The Netherlands and the Caribbean countries. And so that whole
and
charter,
Suriname too.
Yeah, the Caribbean countries. That's the Caribbean countries, including Suriname. And so that is one reality we have to take. And then in that further negotiation, it was then Aruba wanted to get out of the Curacao as its dependencies, as you mentioned earlier, long time. And so they said, okay, if we're gonna do that, each island want the right of self-determination, that somewhere in the future, if I want to step out of the Netherlands Antilles and have my own autonomy, I can do that.
But
Yes?
but you said something, Dr. Arduin. I want to just jump back very briefly because
Sure.
in your writing you mentioned 1983. And I was happy to see that. The reason why, this is my view here, the 1st of April 1983, when Sabre Station St. Martin became separate island territories, I think was really the beginning of the end of the Netherlands Antilles, not Aruba, because this was 83. Aruba
Right.
happened in 86. And then we could see how the whole thing continued to progress as we are today now, countries within the Kingdom of the Netherlands. But I also look at 83 as really the beginning of the Netherlands Antilles falling apart because Sabre Station St. Martin separated at that time in 83.
Right. Very well. Very interesting that you mentioned this. And if you look at my timeline, I
You
just
have it
mentioned some
mentioned, yeah.
key
Right.
years. And that is one of the key years.
Right.
Because as I said, Aruba, since 1922, when these Caribbean territories became a territory instead of just an asset, they were trying to get away from Curacao and its dependency. It was Curacao, the dependency with were the other 5 islands. Okay, finally, they put in a island regulation, interim regulation. Yes, you're all going to have the right of self-determination. And indeed, Oral, while negotiations were going on for Aruba to get autonomous status in 1986, the Windward Islands, who were always the Windward Islands, Sabre Station and St. Martin, was one territory, opted to be separate territories. And we have to remember that, yes? When Aruba in 1986 became an autonomous status, they had negotiated in 10 years we become independent. But guess what? 1996 came, they say, listen, the right of self-determination is my right. And if I today say I don't want to become independent, I'm not becoming independent.
But this brings us back to something very interesting, because during the last referendum of 2000, right? It was June 24, 2000. I was very adamant. I'm in favor of political independence. A lot of other people wanted to stay within the Netherlands Antilles. And when I mentioned what you just mentioned there, I had a lot of people, in St. Martin, some people that knew better, deny it. They said Aruba never opted for independence in 10 years.
Of course they did. And one of their biggest scientists that really worked out, because one thing I always say, we have to get away of saying, I feel that, I think that, no, I feel Holland is not fair. Why do you feel so? What you feel this, I feel something else. As you say, people felt, hey, independence, what you're saying. No. We have to work with facts, yeah? It's not what a politician or a person feel. Sustain it with facts. And Mirto Cruz was the scholar that really worked it out together with Eamon to say, hey, what does the right of self-determination mean? And as you said, independence, I believe, I'm not saying pro or contra independence, but I take Barbados, right? Barbados got autonomous status in 1961. In 1966, they became an independent country within the Commonwealth. And in 2021, they became a republic, preparing themselves for every step. We have 12 years autonomous status. And not emotional question, just a plain objective question. are we ready for independence today? How did we handle autonomy? Did we understand autonomy? Because with autonomy goes accepting responsibility and give account, be accountable. So we have 12 years of practice to evaluate how did we handle autonomy. If we do not have a report card giving us a sufficient mark, not by Holland, by nobody else than by ourselves, yes? The question already is, did we do that evaluation to give ourselves a report card?
We could see it in our hearts. I mean, we failed. Basically, we failed.
You understand?
It's sad to say that, but we failed.
Since I don't have the, since I did
you don't have the report card.
Since I, as a scientist, yes, and always trying to be correct with my facts, yeah. Since I did not do the research and I did not see any report on it, I say apparently we have not done that and we don't have a sufficient mark. If indeed we do not even need a thorough maybe evaluation, because if in 10 years we changed governments 9 times,
exactly.
That is, did we understand? One, did we understand democracy? Did we understand autonomy? Did we understand our constitutional structure?
And you see, Dr. Arduin, it's even more than that, because it took the former Netherlands Antilles, 5 decades plus to build up a 5 billion guilder debt. It took St. Martin 10 years to build up 1 billion guilder debt. And right now, it's counting at 1.5 billion guilders. So if we were told that it would be a street of gold, everyone will have things good because we won't have to deal with Curacao anymore. So from that aspect, it's unfortunate that I sit here today and say, well, we have failed, but in a way, it goes back to some of the things that you wrote in your trilogy. You may not realize that. We as Black people need to take our responsibility serious. And we have to stop denying things. And if we don't do that, we're not going to go far. I think that there's still hope for St. Martin. But for now, the first 11 years, we basically failed.
And I think you said a mouthful, O.J. If you look at it, it's why we have to do not only a historical analysis to see how we reached here, but, as you said, socio-economical, right? I'm saying in 1954, when the Netherlands Antilles got autonomy, no, the people that look like me, the descendants of the enslaved, were not around the table. That means it continues, you had home rule, right?
Right.
The people of the Netherlands Antilles that were the politicians in this autonomous new status were descendants of colonists and the new elites, the elites that came to the islands in the 20s when you got the oil refinery. Okay, they didn't go to school to understand how the constitutional situation works, is do by example, learn on the job, right? And so they continue to govern. I'm saying my conclusion is they continue to govern by do as I saw. We have the awareness movements. I'm not calling them revolutions. They had awareness movement 30th of May 1969 in Curacao, in August 74 on St. Martin. Awareness movements of the socio-economic situation that is part of our history, right? So we continued. Where are our institutions of higher learning? on the whole Netherlands Antilles, there is one institution of higher learning, a real total institution of higher learning. Life continues. We cannot learn on the job anymore. We have to learn, we have to be prepared before we take a seat to manage a country. I mean, Mr. Gibbs, you have businesses. Would you put your cousin that looks good or your friend that is loyal to you to mind your business?
No way.
You understand? No, you need the people that know the constitutional structure, that knows how the system works to manage our country. And that's why my call to action in January was, people, anybody that has a little inclination or aspiration to run for politics in the next 2 years, you better start training now.
But you know what's nice about you is that you can see you as a person. You're a self-actualized person. Abraham Maslow, you fit that description of the fully self-actualized person. Very few people in their lifetime ever achieve that. And
thank you.
You're welcome. And you can see it. And I remember one night, many years ago, and I'm going to call the name, and I'll see your response, Dr. Ben Carson. You remember it?
Yes, we brought him here.
Good. Hold that thought. The reason why I say hold that thought, I have to go to a commercial break. But when I come back, I want to talk with you a little bit about that and other things, because it shows your commitment and your concern, how you want to bring self-pride and respect among us two as Black people. All right? Okay, good. We're going to be right back right here on Oral Gibbs Live after this word.
In order to know what you want out of life, you need to observe, listen, and try it yourself.
Promises, we can make it. If we work together, that's just how it is. Let's stand strong, and serve the land. Working hard as one nation, yes we can.
The more difficult it is to achieve, the more satisfying it is to make it.
Just believe in us, we'll see you through it all. Oh, never give up. Oh, never give up. We can make it.
Never forget those who were there for you. And if you dream big, you might just achieve it.
The power to serve, standing for community. R.J.A. got the power to serve, the power to serve. We got the energy. R.J.A.
Make use of Web Mobile Banking with easy access and direct usage of face recognition, PIN code, or fingerprint. Download Web Mobile Banking app and make your transaction from anywhere at any time. For more information, visit.
My guest on Oral Gibbs Live is Dr. R.J.A. Dr. R.J.A. is an attorney, former first ombudsman, St. Martin, also had the first lawyer with a television program in St. Martin, and a whole lot of things, and responsible for bringing Dr. Ben Carson to St. Martin with her late husband years ago. What year was that, you remember?
I think it was 1996, I think so. Because what happened, in fact, As you know, and people will know, that my husband was a politician. And so in the States, they were having a yearly national prayer breakfast where they invited politicians from all over the world. And my husband was fortunate enough to be invited, so we went. And at that point in time, Bill Clinton was the president, and Ben Carson was the keynote speaker in 1995, I think. And we just had the hurricane. And we were so impressed and motivated by his speech. He was the first black neurosurgeon of world renown. So we were very impressed. And as I said, I'm always bold. I believe in myself. I believe, yes, that, as Obama said, yes, we can. So I had a conversation with his wife and exchanged information. My husband and me said, Edgar Lynch, we will bring him to St. Martin because our people need a boost. Our people have to hear this. And that's why I think it's 1996 it was. So we invited him over. I mean, first time, can you imagine, after a hurricane, you know, we are just building back. But we felt that we needed a push. And I must say the business world worked with us, and we brought him, because can you imagine you bringing one of the world's most renowned neurosurgeons, his hands. He even have a book named Gifted Hands.
Right.
That means the security and the insurance for this man's hand. Like in our lab, you know. So it was very interesting because we also have this notion, and as you said, you know, the compliment which I thank you for. I don't believe to be the best, yeah, or to be better than others based on their quote unquote unfortunate failures or whatever. No, I believe in being authentic. Yes, being the best, you are the head of the pack, but being authentic, you are unique. You do what you can do, and don't compare yourself to others. Yes, I think with that, as you mentioned before the intermission, that has been my drive during my whole life. Yes, being your authentic self. Yeah, and with that, you don't have to fear competition. No, what you do, you bring things to help others to be their authentic best, you know? Right. And so, yes, things like Dr. Ben Carson, you know, don't keep it for ourselves, the two of us, you know, come and share it, you know?
That's the other problem we have as black people. We like to hide things. No, I don't want nobody to know it, you know? Sharing is important.
Absolutely.
It helps. You know?
Absolutely. You can't be that fish in that, you know, a big fish in a small pond, and you know, don't have the room to move.
Right.
I believe, when everybody that have seen me in a training or whatever know that I'm very passionate. I get very passionate if I get the opportunity to share.
Well, you know, we published all of the 3 articles you wrote, the trilogies. You wrote it for Emancipation Day, and if anyone wants to read it, they can still go to my Facebook page.
Fantastic.
And see it. It's still there.
Thank you.
I think it's important for people to read.
Thank you. And I hope that with this conversation that we're having, that they are not only encouraged to go to your page to read it, but do those exercises that I put at the end, because at the end of each each article, I give some exercises for considerations. Those exercises are really to delve deep. And in my last article about the angry blacks, where I talk about transgenerational traumas, I even said in one of the exercises, maybe one might need to have help from a therapist, because acknowledging that you are damaged, acknowledging the things you do is sometimes very hard and difficult, because we play ostrich, and sometimes we do that unconsciously. So sometimes we need a therapist to help us bring it up. Yes, when certain things come up, it hurts. Yeah, you can get angry. However, if you have a therapist to guide you in it, it's important. And as you see, the articles are not written for colored people alone, but for our white, Caucasian, Dutch brothers and sisters as well, because they are as ignorant about the past as many of us are. I remember in 2000, I started here on St. Martin, as I was representing St. Martin in the UNESCO organization, and UNESCO started a project, Breaking the Silence, where they said that the imperial home countries will have to open their archives for descendants of African enslaved people to study the archives themselves and interpret the history from their part, because a lot of imperial home countries do not want to discuss the history, because it's, they are afraid, yes, for the fingers that might be pointed. They're afraid of the reparation movements, and name it. However, the conversation have to start. It has to be had, because if not, we will never get out of the conflict.
Doctor, I want to thank you for coming in. I hope we can have you back again on the radio the next time. Have a good conversation. Really appreciate your contribution so far.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Gibbs, for having me and sharing thoughts.
And thank you again, and continue doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Right.
I will.
Good. And that's it for now. I'll see you next time right here on Oral Gibbs Live. Until then, take care. Bye.